This is Marco Reus.
This is Shinji Kagawa.
This is Nuri Sahin.
Hello, this is Jadon Sancho.
And you're listening to the Yellow Wall podcast.
Welcome to episode 451 of the Yellowwallpod. I'm your host Stefan Butzko, and today we'll talk about the Borussia Dortmund offseason. And for that, I am joined by my partner in crime, Lars Perlman. Hello, Lars. How are you doing?
Hello, Stefan. I'm doing reasonably well. How are you?
I'm stressed. I'm looking forward to my vacation, which starts on Friday. But in the meantime, there is a lot. Well, I don't know if it's a lot, but there are things to discuss. Borussia Dortmund have made a few moves since we've last recorded. I wanted to wait until Dortmund signed someone more prominent. Now, I don't know if Felix Nmecha is a prominent player or not, but at least Dortmund shelled out 30 million for him. But before we talk about him and that whole controversial transfer, let's put it this way, let's quickly rattle off what we've seen happen so far. So obviously Jude Bellingham left Dortmund for Real Madrid. I think the reported fee is somewhere between 100 million, 130 million, depending on whether or not you want to count bonuses. Rafael Guerreiro left Borussia Dortmund in tears, only to join Bayern Munich on a free transfer. And Dortmund have then signed Bensebaini from Gladbach. I think that wasn't really a surprise. We've discussed this transfer a lot already on the Yellowwallpod in the previous season. And of course, the transfer of Felix Nmecha. So, Lars, let's start with the departing players first. Jude Bellingham joining Real Madrid. Had you asked me in the previous summer, I would have hoped that he would play one additional season, to be honest, because his contract might have warranted it. But reality now looks a little bit different, and Dortmund have received over 100 million euros for him. Do you think this is an appropriate fee, or considering that he's being dubbed a generational talent and of course is an English player, which usually raises the price, Dortmund were a little bit underpaid?
I think it was a reasonable transfer fee. I think the problem, as it were, was that Bellingham was basically fixated on Real Madrid fairly early on in the process. I think that's why Liverpool pulled out of the deal. Obviously, they have to do a bit more of an overhaul in their squad, as we've seen now with a few signings. I think if you add Szoboszlai and McAllister, it's basically the fee they would have had to pay for Bellingham, so it's understandable that they pulled out. I think Manchester City carried a level of interest. I don't know how deep that went, but Bellingham, as I said, relatively early on, decided on joining Real Madrid. And once you're only negotiating with one other club, it's always detrimental to your transfer gainings, if you like. But ultimately, I think whenever you get 9 figures for a player, that's still pretty rare. I think Bellingham was the 17th or so player in football transfer history to have a 9-figure fee. And a lot of the bonuses are tied up in easily achievable goals for him personally and for Real Madrid. So we can basically assume it's going to end up somewhere close to the maximum amount, which is, I think, 130 odd something. So ultimately, that's not a bad fee. Could they have gotten a bit more out of it if there had been like a bidding war? Yeah, probably, but that's not how it went. And ultimately, I think if a player really wants to go somewhere as a club, you kind of have to accommodate him. And ultimately, I think I like it better for him to go to Real Madrid because it's the biggest club in the world. It's always I mean, people always go on and on about Dortmund being a selling club and that being kind of a small club mentality to develop players for other teams. But I always maintain that as long as they leave for the biggest clubs in the world, be that Real Madrid, be that Barcelona in the case of Dembele, or Man City in the case of Erling Haaland, I think that's still pretty okay. I think the problem I would have if they lost someone now to, let's say, Newcastle or Juventus a couple of years back, that would have been more of a problem to me, because those are clubs that aren't, in the pecking order much ahead, if ahead at all, of Dortmund. Whereas, when a player gets the chance to join Real Madrid, Barcelona, Man City these days, I think that's fair enough, I suppose.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I personally wish him all the best. He's been awesome for Dortmund in so many capacities. Really became an instant fan favorite. And I mean, didn't he just turn 20 the other day, like last week or so? It's really amazing how young he still is, and to make this move. One question I do have, though, do you think he's going to have an easy time at Real Madrid, or do you think he's going to struggle like a lot of other highly touted Dortmund prospects have after making the move away from Dortmund?
I think the situation at Real Madrid is pretty comfortable for him, because he doesn't have to function right away. He's not going to eat up a lot of minutes right away, I would say, because they've extended Toni Kroos's deal. They have, or will still, I don't have it in front of me necessarily, extend Luka Modric's deal. So they have Camavinga, Tchouaméni, Valverde. It's not like Real need Bellingham to play 38 La Liga games next season and be the absolute difference maker. So I think from that perspective, it's probably the best move for him, because he can adapt himself. We know that he can do that quickly, because he's done it at Dortmund. He's done it at the England national team, and kind of learn. I think when he was presented in Madrid, he said he wanted to be a sponge and get on Kroos's and Modric's nerves. And I think that's the right attitude to have when you join as the young pretender, as it were, trying to get someone else's minutes. You should look up to the guys who've done it for so many years, who've won a handful of Champions League titles. And as I said, I think it's kind of the perfect move in that regard. And I just really like what it says about Bellingham in terms of his personality, because as an England international, it would have been quite easy to go to Man City or whomever else in England and say, this is, let me do 3-4 years here and then go to Real Madrid. But he said, no, I'm going to sign for the biggest club in the world at the age of 19, going to start my journey there at 20. And I think I can do this. And I think that's kind of the mentality he's shown over 3 individually brilliant seasons at Dortmund, which ultimately obviously weren't hugely successful for the club, unfortunately.
Yeah. I don't even know if I want to bring it up. But what I do unfortunately have to bring up now is that Rafael Guerreiro is now a player for Bayern Munich. And I'm not too happy with this development, because as our longtime listeners, and not even that long-time listeners know, I would have liked him sort of as the Bellingham in-house replacement, if you will. But of course, Dortmund did not manage to extend his contract. I feel like the story goes something like, at first Dortmund didn't want to extend, but Guerreiro did, and then Dortmund wanted to extend, but then Guerreiro didn't. Now, Lars, I know that you are equally, if not more, miffed than I am about this transfer. Your thoughts on Guerreiro's 7 years at Dortmund and the exit that he had. Are Dortmund fans, in your opinion, allowed to be disgruntled with this move or not?
With the move, yes. With Guerreiro himself, no. With the club, yes. long-time listeners in this case do know that I never blame the player for any career decisions they make, because they have a limited time frame to make as much money as they can and set themselves up for life. It's easily said that, one season at Dortmund should be enough to last a lifetime, but obviously they adopt a lifestyle that, is not easily maintained once your playing career is over, and that's why a lot of these players can't really manage money and maybe haven't made enough money over the context of their careers, struggle financially after their career. So I never blame the player for any decisions they make. I do blame, in this case, Dortmund, because they let go of the most creative left back in Europe, possibly. Obviously, he's not necessarily only a left back for Dortmund, and that is even an added bonus, or in this case, malus, if you like. That they let him go because obviously he would have been able to give them something that they lose with Bellingham. And we all know that Bensebaini was basically done before the decision ultimately was made with Guerrero, so they could easily have accommodated having both in the squad. That's not how it happened, and I think when you look at Dortmund wanting to extend Guerrero's deal but not really, and then giving him an offer of a 2+1 contract, and then he goes on the free market, and Bayern scoop him up on a 3-year deal, which is what he was looking for from Dortmund, then I don't necessarily understand how anyone could see this as anything but a massive loss for Dortmund and a massive win for Bayern, because obviously he's now not only one of the best Bundesliga players over the last 7 years, again, one of the most creative, on paper anyway, left backs I've ever seen. But he's also playing for Thomas Tuchel, who, until, I don't know, maybe even Terzic in the last few months, was the Dortmund coach who got the most out of Guerrero early on in his time at Dortmund. So, all in all, this is quite clearly one of those deals that doesn't reflect well on anything Dortmund have done. Even if you like Bensebaini, even if you think that he's going to be an upgrade over Guerrero because he's not indifferent about defending most of the time, they still got a lot worse by losing Guerrero, and the icing on the shit cake is that he signed for Bayern, obviously.
Yeah, back with his old mentor, sort of. I don't know why it didn't dawn on me earlier that obviously the Tuchel-Guerrero connection was right there, right in front of me. I somehow did not make it, but yeah. I mean, once the rumors came out, yeah, it was pretty obvious, because I think initially it was linked with Atletico, so yeah, I think this is a really detrimental development for Dortmund. Really, really stupid, really, really bad. And yeah, it's obviously a lot of people are disgruntled with Guerrero because of the reports that he held talks with Bayern in the week before the final match day. Yeah, I don't know. The thing about Guerrero is that he was 7 years in Dortmund. I still have not really any clue who he is. Sort of, I don't know. I mean, he's an amazing, fantastic footballer, but the person Rafael Guerrero, I feel like I've never got to know. Maybe also because he blocked me on Twitter after I sent him a video in, I don't know, probably first season of him not going up for a header, because I was disgruntled from his defending back then, and maybe not very mature about it. But yeah. Yeah, he does enjoy video games, so that's something we share, I guess. But yeah, let's move on to Bensebaini, who of course also joined Dortmund on a free transfer. And I'll be honest, Lars, I'm very underwhelmed by this signing. Maybe he is a defensive upgrade, as you said, but I don't know. I think he is tactically boneheaded sometimes, makes weird positional errors, and I don't know. Offensively, he's obviously not going to be as good as Guerrero, so I'm very reserved on this signing. I think I was actually more excited about Nico Schulz when Dortmund signed him then than I am now about Bensebaini, and make of that what you will. But yeah, he's an average left back. I hope or slightly above average. I hope he fits in well. I hope it works out. But my prediction is that Dortmund will be on the search for yet another left back upgrade going forward with Bensebaini on the left side, because I don't think he is going to raise to the level needed overall as a player. I don't know if I'll be wrong about that or not, but I don't know. I'm just not feeling it. How are you feeling it?
I wouldn't be so harsh as you. I think it's very hard now, after the fact, not to think of Guerrero and then what is ultimately a downgrade to Bensebaini. If we were to look at Bensebaini in a vacuum, I think you would have to say that he's been an above average left back in the Bundesliga, at least over the last few years. He gets involved in quite a lot of goals for a left back, obviously not as much as Guerrero, but nobody does who plays that position regularly in Germany anyway. He's very good physically, which is definitely something that Dortmund are looking for in all their signings over the last 18 months or whatever. Because Terzic quite clearly has a favoritism towards players who are physically strong, who are more often than not tall and quick and physical. So ultimately Bensebaini doesn't move the needle for me too much. I think it was kind of a no-brainer to sign him on a free. Obviously free transfers aren't entirely free because there are bonus payments handed out to players and their agents, but it's still cheaper than, for example, splashing 25 million on Nico Schulz and giving him 5.5 million on a 5-year deal. And I, for one, definitely wasn't more excited about Nico Schulz joining than Bensebaini, who I think will ultimately do a reasonable job. It's just hard to get excited about anyone who isn't Guerrero because we've been treated to Guerrero over the last few years. And I do agree with the idea that possibly Bensebaini is going to be a defensive upgrade, just because, better work rate, better physical tools to be a left back and not a left creator or whatever you want to call Guerrero. But as you said, he's also making rash, dumb decisions from time to time. He's fairly likely to get sent off once a season, it seems. And also being from Algeria, he's likely to be away at AFCON early next year. Same goes for Sébastien Haller with Côte d'Ivoire. So all in all, I can definitely understand the logic behind signing him, and it's unfair to the player, but I think it's impossible not to consider him in the light of losing Guerrero, and then it's a clear downgrade. Whereas, again, if we were just looking at Bensebaini, that's definitely a fine 6 or 7 out of 10 kind of signing.
Here's the thing, though. I wouldn't even really compare him to Guerrero. Because to me, Guerrero was never an ideal left back, so I was always hoping that Dortmund would find a better left back than Guerrero, and ideally keep Guerrero around as a midfielder. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just not excited. That's my bottom line. And maybe he can, develop in a player that he is not yet. That chance certainly does exist. But it's, I don't know. To me, overall, this summer transfer window so far has been very underwhelming. And I think that the main part of why is that Dortmund have signed Felix Nmecha from VfL Wolfsburg and splashing around 30 million in doing so, which to me is a bit of an overpay. But of course, when you read a statement like the following in a club, announcing a player, where Hans-Joachim and Reinhold Luno, the CEO and president, both in a joint statement wrote, "We are aware that this upcoming transfer has also attracted criticism in recent days Due to 2 internet posts shared by Felix as a result, it was important for us to talk intensively with the player and his faith and values. Felix is very young, his religion is deeply rooted in him, and he, like all of us, is certainly not without faults, but he has completely convinced us in intensive talks that he does not hold any transphobic or homophobic beliefs. Felix has himself emphasized that he respects all people and loves irrespective skin color, religion, or sexual orientation. Full stop. Lars, that is a bit of a humdinger to come out of an announcement of a player signing. Now, I must admit, I haven't really looked into it too much yet, but I've seen the posts here and there, and of course, being that I live in America, am sort of familiar with Matt Walsh's work, and it is a very problematic, somewhat controversial topic. Maybe can you still, because I know your moral compass is very much intact, explain this whole controversy a little bit, especially for people who may not live 24/7 on Twitter or have paid too much attention to what is going on in this entire scenario.
How much time do we got, Stefan?
An hour.
Yeah.
Ish.
Because quite frankly, it's such a loaded discussion, a lot of sensibilities that we have to take into account, but I'll try to keep it brief and try to not talk myself into too much of a frenzy, because I have quite strong feelings about this whole thing. Maybe starting with what he actually shared on Instagram, and I don't know if it was a story which auto-deletes or whether those were posts that he deleted afterwards, but anyway, one of them, as you said, Matt Walsh, a general right-wing nutter. I think he calls himself a theocratic fascist on Twitter or something like that. So
yes,
definitely not someone you want to associate yourself with. And as a club, you don't want your players to associate with them. But that's what Nmecha did. He shared, let's say, a video in which Mr. Walsh was talking about gender. I actually don't even have the vocabulary to describe it in English, so just look it up if you're interested. He was those were comments that were clearly meant to engender transphobic feelings and make it seem as if people were trying to make little kids, I think the one in the video mentioned is 3 years old, turn them into the opposite sex, as it were. The other post compared pride to grace, so the biblical sin pride to, I guess, Jesus's grace or Christian grace as a general concept, and showing how pride was very problematic for a religious or Christian person, which is, I guess, fair enough. I mean, I don't necessarily share any particularly fundamental Christian views, despite my Catholic upbringing and the fact that my brother is a Catholic priest. But the clear problem there was that it was at the start of Pride Month. So it wasn't just, saying pride is a sin. Read the Bible. It was with a clear connotation that, what happens during Pride Month and LGBTQIA, or I'm sorry if I miss any letters there, anything in terms of representation in that regard is a sin or problematic for Nmecha and whoever shares his beliefs. And quite frankly, the problem for me isn't if he himself holds homophobic, transphobic viewpoints. He wouldn't be the only one in Dortmund squad, I can tell you that much. Not because I have intimate knowledge of them, but it's just basically a numbers game. If you have a group of 25
Yeah, it's a very difficult topic, obviously, because you can already, at least on social media, see a rift between Dortmund fans. It was a hot topic, for sure, and a lot of Dortmund fans disagree with each other over this. And I personally don't like it. I must say, I really wish there was more agreement of Dortmund fans over the fact that this is clearly homophobic and transphobic and queerphobic bullshit. And I wasn't also best pleased by Dr. Reinhold Luno, the now president, saying that these contents can be or could be interpreted as homophobic or queerphobic. And obviously there are a lot, you were just talking about the numbers game. Statistically, this is 100% guaranteed that there are a lot of gay, lesbian, queer, trans, and other Dortmund fans that, of course, also bear the brunt of this whole nonsense and have to deal with this bullshit because, if you open your mouth online, you will definitely attract abuse. I've experienced it myself quite a lot, quite vividly, and it is certainly not something you want to be dealing with, and now Dortmund have to be dealing with it. And it sucks. So, if you are, having even a shittier experience being a Dortmund fan because of that, I'm sorry for you. But I've seen a lot of people who said that they're considering not going to the stadium because they do not want these kinds of discussions that are currently going on in the on the internet. They don't want to have them in the stands either. They do not have that extra energy or whatever. And it is very difficult because I personally wouldn't have signed him because of that. I'm pretty clear. Second chance, yeah, maybe, but I don't know. I think there are other number 8s out there that Dortmund could have found that aren't Felix Nmecha. Now, we of course also have to talk about the player because he is de facto the replacement for Jude Bellingham. I'm not sure if Dortmund will find another number 8, but I'm pretty sure they're not going to find someone they're spending more than 30 million on. So I guess for now, he is the de facto playmaker in Edin Terzic's system, and of course he's already a German international. He is 22 years old, and I don't really know too many things about the player himself because I personally don't watch a lot of Wolfsburg. But his stats are alright in terms of his non-penalty goal production by FBref. It's 0.15 per 90, which is about half of what Bellingham produced. He does take almost 2 shots per game, which is good. His assist rate is at 0.25, expected assists at 0.16 per game. His passes attempted are very low for a player in his position. I don't know if this is down to the Wolfsburg system or not. It's always hard to gauge from this, but progressive passes isn't very high. It's in the lower third compared to players in this position, and the progressive carry is also not really high. But at least the successful take-ons stat is 1.27 per 90, which is important because that's something that Jude Bellingham did really well. So at least in that category, he's in the 81st percentile. And defensively, I think he's a solid player, but I'll be honest, 30 million seems a bit high. Lars, am I wrong? Is he worth the money if you exclude all the other nonsense, which is hard to do, but if you just look at the footballer Felix Nmecha, is he worth 30 million or did Dortmund overpay?
I guess that's almost a philosophical question because you could easily argue that players are worth whatever clubs are willing to spend on them. The question becomes, would I have been comfortable spending 25 plus 7, or however the actual division between the basis fee and bonus payments ends up being. I personally wouldn't have been comfortable with that, because Nmecha has really only played one full season at this level. That was a pretty good season last year, but not a great one. Obviously, it's always a bit difficult to project how someone from a team like Wolfsburg, who are very much out of the center of attention in German football generally, and have a somewhat different playing style from Dortmund, just because under Niko Kovac they do the typical Kovac thing of trying to do most things on the counter and not necessarily loving possession, even though I think stats wise they weren't terrible on the ball last season. I think the problem is, obviously he's going to be compared to Bellingham all the time. I think the club were quite smart not to give him Bellingham's number 22, which Nmecha wore at Wolfsburg last year. They gave him Dawood's number 8, which is also where he's going to play.
Yeah, I think that's right, at least.
Yeah, I mean,
at least in my numbers thing, I'm satisfied. I'm still very pissed at Torgen Hazard having had the number 10. So at least in that category, I'm appeased.
Yeah. I mean, the problem with the comparison is that I don't think they are actually all that similar players, Nmecha and Bellingham. I mean, Nmecha is taller. He's quite a bit quicker. He's better in the air without Bellingham having been bad in the air. But I think Nmecha has scored all his Bundesliga goals so far with headers.
That's interesting.
I mean, I've only seen 3 of his goals, and I think he has only scored 3 goals.
I was going to say, in last Bundesliga season, he scored 3 goals, had 5 assists in 30 games played.
Which is always, we all know that assists can be a misleading number. And
well, we need to know the pre-assist numbers. Get it together, FBref. That's what we really need.
So, Nmecha is, I think, technically a bit more gifted, let's say, than Bellingham, who at times, I think, on the ball did things out of sheer will and determination, whereas with Nmecha it always looks easy. I think it's hard to talk about Nmecha, ceteris paribus, with everything else not being a consideration, but if we were able to just look at the player, I think it's easy to see why a coach looks at the raw material and thinks, I can turn this into a great player, because there's a lot to like in terms of natural raw ability. The physical skill set is excellent for a central midfielder in the modern game. And if you look at highlight videos or whatever, there's always a bit problematic, because if something doesn't work, you just don't show it. And sometimes Nmecha will do a nice turn upfield and the video cuts before he loses the ball. But if you know football, you know he lost the ball there, because otherwise they wouldn't have cut the video. Which is all to say, would I have spent 30 million on him? Definitely not. Do I understand why Terzic looked at the guy and thought, hey, I'm a good coach. I develop players. I can develop this guy. I can understand that. And ultimately, it's not going to be fair towards Nmecha to always compare him to Bellingham. It's obviously still going to happen. But I also think that Dortmund will be well served to sign another option in midfield, possibly a more defensive-minded, which I think is also just on the table. Because nobody is going to replace everything that Bellingham has done over 3 years, and especially growing into the player he was last year. And having that expectation from anyone is crazy. And even if Nmecha is 2 and a bit years older than Bellingham, he's not nearly as far along as Bellingham has been it's more comparable, I guess, to Bellingham after his first season at Dortmund, so the 2021 version. And can Nmecha develop into somewhat of what Bellingham has done? Certainly, because he's got all the raw ability, but I think if we do now take the other stuff into account, he's going to have a mountain to climb just to get everyone on track with him, and it's definitely not going to be easy at the start for him. And if he didn't hold or seem to hold despicable views, I'd almost feel sorry for him in some regards.
Yeah, it's obviously not going to be easy for him now. Obviously, you know me. What I want most out of my number 8 are line-breaking Hollywood passes. And of course, Ilkay Gündoğan would have been my favorite result, but obviously that was never going to happen. That was just not realistic at all. But is this a skill that you've seen, be it highlight videos or just watching Wolfsburg games, that he does possess, or Germany games for that matter, or under 21 games?
Well, I actually was in the stadium for his one and only senior international game, which was in Cologne, the 2-3 loss against Belgium. Can't necessarily say that he made any kind of impression on me there, but that was the case for everyone on the German team, except Emre Can, actually. And maybe Serge Gnabry, but I digress. I mean, I would answer with another question. Do you think that was Bellingham's forte at any point during the last few years?
I don't actually think it was. If I had to point out one weakness of Bellingham, is that his line breaking passes were not up to par for a player in his position, considering what you would expect from a player of his caliber. So sometimes you have an amazing player that has a slight deficit in one area, and so you sign a different player who does not have that deficit, and so at least you can get excited about this one single thing. At least in my way, that's how it often is. I don't know if it's similar for you, but if Nmecha has this, maybe this is something I can get excited about. But right now, I don't know. I struggle being excited about this transfer in general, and I really have to observe how Dortmund and how the player handle all this, because he is one stupid Instagram post away from more controversy and Dortmund looking really, really stupid. So we'll see how this goes. But as you said, there are of course other things that Dortmund have to do now. What is the latest on Ajax's Edson Alvarez? Or Edison Alvarez?
Edson. Obviously, people will have noticed, I think last week, coming from Dutch reporters, the quite surprising report that the transfer had fallen through, with Dortmund ultimately unwilling to pay up for Alvarez, which I kind of can understand, because he and Emre Can fill out a fairly similar profile in terms of being holding midfielders who are also quite comfortable dropping into defense, be that in a 3-man build-up scheme or just a regular 3-man defensive line. But then, to start this week, reports from Germany coming out that the deal is not considered at Dortmund to be completely dead, because they obviously had gained approval by Alvarez himself. He apparently was already looking for housing options in Dortmund, so he seemed keen enough. And I think as of right now, there's no reports about him going anywhere else, and he apparently has a promise from the Ajax directors, even though that was before Sven Mislintat took over there, that he can leave this year because last year they blocked a much more expensive, by the way, move to Chelsea. The reporting is that he's still available for a base fee of 35 million plus however much in bonus payments. I would be surprised if Dortmund were suddenly willing to pay that after not being able to agree with everyone that that's something they should pursue. The talk of the town is that Sebastian Kehl was really keen on the signing, did all the legwork, went to Amsterdam talking to Alvarez and his girlfriend and basically getting the deal towards the finish line. And then once they were, talking amongst themselves, are we all on board with this? Apparently Edin Terzic said, you know what, I'm quite fine with Emre Can. I don't think we need to spend this much on another defensive midfielder. And that's when the deal apparently fell through, if it did. But yeah, I'm not certain that anything has materially changed since then that would make Dortmund now be comfortable with signing Alvarez. So unless the conditions change in their favor, I think it's fairly unlikely. Because quite frankly, if you are Alvarez and last year Chelsea wanted to pay over 50 million for you and you were already looking for housing options in Dortmund and they say, you know what, all the work we did, we kind of want to go back on all that. That would piss me off royally if I were Alvarez. And I think the good thing for him is he's currently at the Gold Cup. He's playing for Mexico, who haven't gone the US route of sending basically a B team. So he's able to exact his anger on opponents. But I would be quite surprised if the deal happened now.
Yeah, I actually did see him when Mexico played the United States in the Nations League final, I think it was, and or semifinal, I don't even remember. But yeah, already an all-time classic game because of all the sending offs in it, and the very first scene of that game was Edson Alvarez completely hacking someone down. I forgot who it was, but you know, a completely reckless challenge. Did I see a player worth about, I don't know, what was the reported fee at that point, 40 million? Nah, probably not. But do Dortmund need a player on the number 6 position of a higher caliber? Yeah, I would say so. I'm where you are. I'm very glad about Emre Can's development and how he finished out the season, let's say. But do I know if Emre Can can replicate this form, can hold on to it going into the next season? I have no idea. Maybe he can improve upon it. I don't know, but I'm with you. I think Dortmund need to bolster up the midfield. Now, someone who I probably would have liked to see in Dortmund is Ines Giri, who just joined Eintracht Frankfurt on a free transfer from Cologne. Yeah, so the other news out there right now is that Weston McKennie is, according to our good friend Konstantin Egner, being rumored with Borussia Dortmund. Either talks happened or something. Now, I personally can't really see this happening at all, and I don't know if I want to call out Konstantin, but I have a hard time imagining Dortmund really having any real interest into Weston McKennie, the former Schalke and Juventus player. But Lars, should we indulge this at least for 1 second and say Dortmund were to sign him? Do you see him then starting over Emre Can, or where would you see a Weston McKennie in the Borussia Dortmund midfield?
I mean, I don't remember him ever or seeing him as the lone holding midfielder anywhere.
Yeah, neither do I. Would
I
it
don't
be more?
think I don't think he's a DM. I mean, I definitely don't want them to sign McKennie. couldn't care less about his Schalke past in that regard, because I just don't rate him as a player. Outside of work rate and maybe aggression, I don't see anything close to Dortmund level with him, and I was already quite surprised when Juventus signed him. And to be fair to him, he did reasonably well at the start for Juventus. They kind of liked him there, but when they sent him out on loan with an obligation to buy, which Leeds United avoided by way of relegation, that kind of said it all. And then I think he was regularly featured among the worst, or let's say most disappointing players of the last Premier League season, after not really doing too much for Leeds as far as I know. So yeah, I mean, it's sometimes fun to think of shit transfers a club could make, but I would definitely question the logic of that signing, and I'm quite happy, even if it's against our colleague, as it were, Konstantin, that basically everyone else is saying that McKennie is not coming to Dortmund.
Yeah. Let's leave it at that in terms of McKennie. And now, Lars, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask: are there any players out there that you would like to see Dortmund sign?
I'm sure I could think of some. I think the big one I wanted them to go for was Schiri, as you said, but he's now apparently off to Frankfurt, which is an amazing deal for Frankfurt, because he was rumored to go to maybe AC Milan or Sevilla, so clubs of a bit of a different category. No offense to Frankfurt, so that would have been quite an obvious fit, because he basically does everything well in midfield and has played under Steffen Baumgart for Cologne, which we know Dortmund like as a system and as a playing style in general, because they've already signed Salih Özcan and also Anthony Modeste. Other than that, I'm not sure. I think they are going to sign a fullback, probably not Ivan Fresneda, because he's apparently off to Barcelona. They might need another centre half, especially if Soumaila Koulibaly is off to Burnley, as it seems to be the case. Another midfielder type, possibly more in the holding variety. And I wouldn't be surprised if they signed another attacking option, not necessarily a striker, but they were rumored to be interested in Sergio Arribas of Real Madrid Castilla, who I think scored like 21 goals this season in granted the Spanish third division, but he's being considered as a future first team player for Real Madrid. So, someone just to give them another option, because right now I think you're looking at Malen and Adeyemi, and then it's already Bynoe-Gittens, oft injured right now, Gio Reyna, oft injured, Julien Duranville, 16 years old, or maybe he's 17 now, playing his second Bundesliga game the next time he's on the pitch, so wouldn't be the worst idea to just have another attacking option, but quite frankly...
we still have Brandt and Reus.
Yeah, but they are not going to play on the wings for Edin Terzic.
That is true.
Maybe Brandt in a pinch, but I mean, they were cooking with gas last season when they figured out how to use Malen and Adeyemi, and I think especially Duranville could give them something similar next season or this season now, I guess. But just another option. But I genuinely think it's not going to be the case that they fill all those holes, if we want to call them that, until they get rid of some of the quote-unquote dead weight. So there's now a rumor about Thomas Meunier going back to Belgium. Nico Schulz wasn't at the first day of preseason because he's being set free for talks with other clubs. I don't know who in their right mind would want to sign him, but maybe there's an option for him to leave.
That would be amazing.
Presumably Dortmund will have to pay a a large portion of his wages for the last year of his contract, but still just good not to have him around. And then Torgan Hazard doesn't seem to have a great market either, so that's just 3 players with very high wages taking up space in the squad without having, any realistic opportunity to play much next season. So I guess getting rid, if we want to be so frank, of those guys will free up a lot of space in their wage budget and allow them possibly to go back to the shopping aisle maybe more towards the middle or end of August. So I wouldn't be shocked if there was quite a bit of late business this year.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think there's going to be too much happening in the next couple of weeks, if I'm brutally honest. When does the transfer window close? Is it the beginning of September, end of August?
First or 2nd of September, yeah.
Yeah, so I think most of the stuff will actually get done then. Is the season underway by then? The schedule was just released.
It is.
Yeah, Dortmund, I think, do they host Cologne in the opening match? That's about as much as I've gathered. They also play Mainz in the cup, but it's not FSV Mainz, it's TSV Schott Mainz. So yeah, that hopefully Dortmund can survive from. I don't even know what division they play in, but it can be very high. Because I
think they're Regionalliga, so 4th division.
Yeah, that should be a doable fixture for Dortmund. Yeah. I don't know what else to say, really. There are not that many exciting rumors out there that really perk up my ears, if I'm honest. So far, the summer window has been quite underwhelming. I'll be honest. I thought there would be a bit more movement, and I thought Dortmund had a more exciting player lined up than Felix Nmecha as Bellingham's replacement. I'm also frank about that. So far, the way Kiel and the entire club have handled the summer window, I don't know. I see myself paying less and less attention if that's any indicator of how it's going. So it's not going great. Yeah, it's weird to see the performance diagnostics already start, because for me personally, I'm still on a summer break mentally, and so I assume that training camp will start soonish, and the whole ramp up for the season. But I'm certainly not in that mode yet. I'm very much still in the off-season mode, and I hope this will remain a thing for a little while. Lars, I'd say we'll definitely not be back before our vacation. I don't think anything earth-shattering will happen in that time anyway. So I guess in 2-3 weeks, if anything really of interest happens, we'll be back. If not, it might be another month. I'll be honest. But as always, thank you for coming on. Everyone out there, thank you for listening. And have a great summer. Until then, goodbye.